Dear students, greetings for the day. Today we will study some topics of elements of design, form, shape, space, texture, and composition. Shapes, whether natural, geometric, or abstract, add interest in the design always. Shapes are outlined by boundaries, like lines or color, and are often used to emphasize specific portion of the page. In essence, everything is a shape, therefore you must always think in terms of how the various elements of your design are creating shapes, and the way those shapes are interacting. Space is an element that gives to readers a room for breathe and leads their eyes through the design. Space also helps in adding emotional feels such as free, open, crowded, claustrophobic, etc. Scale and size can bring contrast and balance in your design if you know how to manage them with perfection. Size is the actual dimension of an object, while scale is the element's relation to its original form and size. Value is the most neglected element of the design. Generally, designers don't focus on this point. Value is very good for adding unity and controlling readers' eyes through the designs. It plays a vital role in managing contrast and balance in the design.
Art is made up of many elements, but arguably the most important is line, shape, and form. Line is just that, a simple line. It can be squiggly, straight, broken up into many lines, or anything else you can think of. Lines can also be thick or thin, or have line variation that goes from thick to thin, which is my favorite way of using them. They can even have a texture to them, or make the feeling of texture or shading, or both, just by being used in a certain way. Like here is an amazing example by the super talented DZO Xavier, who makes extremely detailed illustrations using lines in all sorts of ways. He's master at pen and ink illustration, and it really shows with the depth and detail of his work. And he does all this using simple technical pens. Another good example is the work by Katie Wolford. She uses continuous lines to make her illustrations. This just means she never lifts her pen off the page. So her illustrations are essentially one very long line. Isn't that awesome? Here's another example by a master of line, Sarah Tepes. Her lines are fluid, full of character and life, and this was done in ink, but look at this pencil drawing. It feels just as alive, even if it's a different line type that isn't as expressive. As you can see, there's a lot that you can achieve with line. The funny thing about lines is that if you look at the world around you, you can't see lines outlining things, but when we draw, especially when starting out, we tend to draw contour line drawings, which is just an outline style of drawing. This is a great way to learn how to draw and to notice the details, but it can also make things look more cartoony and less realistic. Some artists use outlines with realistic work on purpose for cool contrast or because it's their style, like DZO does, but some don't. For example, if you look at the extremely skilled artist Azabu, you can see in her finished pieces she gets a very lifelike feel by not using outlines. But here's a different example from her sketchbook that feels less realistic and more stylized because she did use outlines. So as you can see, they both have different feelings to them. Another awesome thing about her realistic pieces is she actually uses lines that are close together to shade. Outlining or not using outlines is up to you. There is no right way of making art, but it's good to be aware of the effect you get by including or excluding outlines. I personally do use lines in most of my work by breaking them up and not letting them touch all the way. They up the contrast and detail in my pieces, but that's just my style. The point is, I'm aware of how line affects my art and use it deliberately. But it's not something I usually think about. Like all the concepts I will teach you, at first you will think about it a lot, but after a while, picking what to do will become an automatic expression of your style, and you will know what effect you will achieve automatically. Just try to be aware of how different artists use line when you look at their work, and you will naturally develop a feel for the different ways you can use line too. Also, get as creative as you want, because line is super versatile and the possibilities are infinite. Next is shape. Shape is just what happens when a line meets back where it starts. Squares, circles, triangles, and so forth are all shapes. Shapes are 2D, which means they're flat. Shapes are extremely useful, especially when sketching proportions of what you want to draw. In my You Can Draw Anything class, I showed you how to break down objects that you see into basic shapes. In this way, you can start your sketches with the basic proportions, and you don't have to worry about when you add detail it ending up looking wonky, because you already know where everything is supposed to go. Having the skill of looking around you and seeing the basic shapes that make things up is really essential as an artist. If it's hard for you to see the shapes in everyday objects, I recommend you get magazines or books with pictures in them and try to break down the pictures that you see into shapes using a Sharpie marker. Or if you have a tablet, that's even better. You can just use a lot of different images and do the same thing by tracing over. Keep doing this until it becomes easy to see them. Be sure to keep it simple and you're all set. Seeing shapes in complex objects will make it easy to draw anything you want. Another fun thing you can do with shapes is exaggerate or play with them. For example, artist Eleni Kaler-Kori uses shape in an interesting way. She not only pays attention to the shape of her subject, but also to the shapes made in the background or the negative space. Notice how your eye travels through all the shapes, and it's so much fun to look at them. Shapes play a huge role in her style, and as you can see, they give her work a really cool feeling. Another great example is if you put 3 circles together, you think of one of the most famous cartoon characters ever made. That's because good character designers know the importance of shapes and always pay careful attention to the silhouettes of their characters. As you can see, you can recognize who each of these characters is, even though I'm just showing you the silhouette. The silhouette is super important. These are just a few examples, but you really can do a lot with simple shapes, so don't underestimate them and play with them. Now, form is a little bit more complex. It's essentially a 3D shape. So a circle is a shape and a sphere is form. Same thing with a square versus a cube. Form is important because we live in a 3D world, and because of this, your subject will usually be 3D. You have to understand this and think of it as a 3D subject, especially when you're using a photo reference. It can be easy to forget that it's a real thing that you have a photo of. That's why I recommend you start drawing from life. But when you do end up using photos, just keeping in mind that it is a 3D thing that you're looking at will make your rendering more realistic and it will feel right. Thinking of your subject as 3D means you pay special attention to lighting and the angle they're facing and so forth. For example, if you look at Gabrielle Brickey's work, the first thing you will notice is all her portraits feel alive and real. Even though they are stylized and the edges are blended out, it feels like you're looking at a real person because she's a master at seeing things in 3D and at knowing how light bounces off each part of the face. Luckily for you, she is also a Skillshare teacher and has a class on how to use lighting in portraits. I encourage you to check it out if you want to draw or paint people. But don't worry if this got a little too complicated for you. You will naturally get used to thinking about form with time, and I will show you a way to practice seeing and drawing form in the drawing exercises lesson. Now let's talk about value.
Types of shapes. Geometric shapes or mechanical shapes are shapes that can be drawn using a ruler or compass, such as squares, circles, triangles, ellipses, parallelograms, stars, and so on. Mechanical shapes, whether simple or complex, produce a feeling of control and order. Organic shapes are irregular shapes that are often complex and resemble shapes that are found in nature. Organic shapes can be drawn by hand, which is why they are sometimes subjective and only exist in the imagination of the artist. Curvilinear shapes are composed of curved lines and smooth edges. They give off a more natural feeling to the shape. In contrast, rectilinear shapes are composed of sharp edges and right angles, and give off a sense of order in the composition. They look more human-made, structured, and artificial. Artists can choose to create a composition that revolves mainly around one of these styles of shape, or they can choose to combine both. Form and shape are areas or masses which define objects in space. Form and shape imply space, indeed they cannot exist without space. There are various ways to categorize form and shape. Form and shape can be thought of as either two-dimensional or three-dimensional. Two-dimensional form has width and height. It can also create the illusion of three-dimensional objects. Three-dimensional shape has depth as well as width and height. Form and shape can also be described as either organic or geometric. Organic forms such as these snow-covered boulders typically are irregular in outline and often asymmetrical. Organic forms are most often thought of as naturally occurring. Geometric forms are those which correspond to named regular shapes, such as squares, rectangles, circles, cubes, spheres, cones, and other regular forms. Architecture, such as this example by Frank Lloyd Wright, is usually composed of geometric forms. These forms are most often thought of as constructed or made. If you are interested in the visual possibilities of geometric forms, take a look at an index to images of mathematical origami. You might wish to look at this website, or at least at these mathematically generated forms. However, not all made objects are geometric. Many designed forms have irregular contours. Although this kimono is geometric in its construction, the surface design is organic in form. Nor are all naturally occurring objects organic. Snowflakes and soap bubbles are among many geometric forms found in nature. If you are interested in seeing other visual examples of geometry in nature, you might enjoy looking at this site, in which patterns found in nature are explored. There are some other terms commonly used to describe form and shape in composition. These have to do with what kind of representations the forms have. If we can recognize everyday objects and environments, we refer to the images as being realistic or naturalistic. However, if the images are difficult or impossible to identify in terms of our normal, daily visual experience, we may refer to the images as abstract. Generally, abstractions are abstracted or derived from realistic images, perhaps even distorted, but perhaps in such a way that the source is not immediately apparent. An example of this would be one of Georgia O'Keeffe's paintings of a detail from a flower. This kind of abstraction in art is sometimes referred to as an objective image, that is, it is derived from an actual object. On the other hand, some abstract art images are based on a pure study of form, line, and color, and do not refer to any real-world object or scene. Such artworks are sometimes referred to as non-objective images.
Let's learn about the difference between shapes and forms. Shapes are two-dimensional or 2D. A square, a triangle, a circle, a star, these are all two-dimensional shapes. Shapes are called two-dimensional because you can measure them two ways. You can measure the height and the width of a shape. Forms are three-dimensional, or 3D. A square is 2D, but a cube is 3D. A triangle is two-dimensional, but a pyramid is three-dimensional. A sphere is the 3D version of a circle. Spheres are fun because to make a sphere 3D, you have to use pencil shading. The shadow on the sphere makes it look like it's curving around. So let's look at this again. Forms are three-dimensional. To make a cube, you use parallel lines, and then you connect them. Your parallel lines go at an angle. I can measure this cube three ways. I can measure a shape two ways, but this is a form. I can measure the height, width, and the depth. Let's see that again. Forms are three-dimensional. They're made with parallel lines, diagonal parallel lines. I can measure them three ways: height, width, and depth. That makes them 3D. We're going to practice drawing some forms. Remember, forms are three-dimensional. They have height, width, and depth. So I can measure them three ways. I'm going to show you guys how to draw a cube, a pyramid, a rectangular prism, and a sphere. To make a cube, start by drawing a square. Next, we're going to add diagonal parallel lines coming from 3 of the square's corners. To make your lines parallel, you can just slide your ruler across your paper. I have 3 diagonal parallel lines. Next, we're going to connect the sides of the cube with lines that match the square. When you connect the parallel lines, make sure that your line matches the side of the cube. Notice how that ruler edge is parallel to the side of the square. I can see through my ruler, so I can make sure that my ruler is parallel to the side of the square. Now I have a cube. I have extra lines sticking out of my cube, so I'm going to clean up my drawing with an eraser. Now I'm going to draw a pyramid. To make a pyramid, I start by drawing a triangle. After I draw the triangle, I make a diagonal line from the bottom corner that's pointing up. Now I connect that diagonal line with the point of the triangle, and I'll have a pyramid. Next, I'm going to make a rectangular prism. Rectangular prisms are just like making a cube, except instead of starting with a square, you start with a rectangle. Again, you'll make 3 parallel lines from 3 corners of the rectangle. Notice I'm sliding my ruler. Connect the diagonals for the rectangular prism just like you connected the diagonals to make a cube. Next, let's make a sphere. To make a sphere, start out by drawing a circle. It's okay to keep drawing the circle until you have enough lines to make it as perfect as you want. You can take an eraser and erase the lines that you don't need. Next, I'm going to shade the sphere. When I do pencil shading, I like to use the side of my pencil lead. I don't use the point like that because that will make a really heavy, dark mark. Use the side of your pencil and it will make a fuzzy mark that looks like a shadow. Shade the sphere, darker on the edge and lighter towards the middle. Smudging the pencil with your finger will help to get that shadow effect. Darker on the edge and lighter in the middle. Next, create a shadow on the ground next to the sphere. This makes it look even more three-dimensional. After you finish shading the sphere, the next thing we're going to do is shade the cube, the rectangular prism, and the pyramid. Keep using the side of your pencil just like I showed you, and remember you can smudge your shading with your finger. One side of the cube should be darker, and one side should be lighter, and one side should be completely white. When you think about shading forms and other objects, think about where the light comes from. I shaded the sphere so that the light looked like it was coming from the top left. The same thing with the cube, so the pyramid will have a shadow on the right side, opposite the light bulb that I drew on my paper. The same thing will be true for the rectangular prism. come to class, we're going to do some more form drawings, and we're going to continue shading them, but we're going to add Sharpie outlines and watercolor paint.
A valuable element in the artist's codebook is texture because it engages another sense besides sight. Texture is tactile, that is, it appeals to our sense of touch. Artists know this element can appeal to viewers and may try to recreate the illusion of texture, or add real texture to stimulate our tactile nature. Texture is a powerful art element because it can quickly evoke memories and emotions. Start becoming more aware of textures all around you: the carpet, in the clothes you're wearing, and the fur on your cat. Finally, look carefully to see how adjectives that describe soft texture. Section: examples of adjectives that can be used to describe textures that are soft to the touch are cottony, downy, fuzzy, feathery, fluffy, furry, hairy, puffy, silky, soft, woolen and velvety. Adjectives that describe hard texture. Section: examples of adjectives that can be used to describe textures that are hard to the touch are bony, hard, wooden, metallic, glossy, rigid, smooth, steely, stiff, tough and unyielding. Adjectives that describe resilient textures. Section: examples of adjectives that can be used to describe textures that are resilient to the touch are bloated, flabby, flexible, rubbery, resilient, spongy, squashy, squishy and yielding. Adjectives that describe mixed texture. Section: examples of adjectives that can be used to describe textures that are mixed to the touch are abrasive, bumpy, coarse, grainy, grooved, gritty, jagged, lumpy, pitted, pockmarked, ragged, rough, rugged, scratchy, stubbly, uneven and wavy. The application of textured objects to the surface of an artwork, or the creation of art from textured materials. Texture can be created by carving, incising or scratching into a surface. The creation of visible texture in an artwork from the application of found or manipulated textured materials. For example, the application of rows of shells to a headdress to create the illusion of hair texture. Visual texture so realistic that it fools the eye into believing it is reality. The visual sensation of texture on a non-textured surface. Simulated textures are created by the manipulation of lights and shadows, line, rhythm and other visual elements. Simulated texture can be achieved using a variety of media such as pencil, pen, paint, photography and computer-generated imagery. Invented textures are the creation of the artist, designer. They are made up for expressive or decorative purposes and are not the representation of or abstractions from actual textures. Caricature is a special instance of abstraction, in which realistic images are distorted to make a statement about the people, places, or objects portrayed. This is probably the kind of abstraction we are most familiar with, as it is constantly presented to us via all sorts of popular media. However, it is important to remember that had not the more difficult to understand conventions of abstraction in the fine arts not broken ground with experiments in distortion, we would not be able to make sense out of some caricature images. A century ago, there was really nothing equivalent to our modern cartoons. Our perception of shape and form are affected by several factors. The position or viewpoint from which we see an object will emphasize or obscure certain features, and therefore affect the impression it makes. As you can see in this series of photographs, all featuring the same wooden artist's mannequin, the character of the space around the object can distract, focus, or alter our impression. A cluttered background tends to diminish the importance of the object, while a plain background draws attention to it. The character and source of light also changes the perceived character of the object. Lighting in a photographic portrait, for example, can make the subject look older, younger, dramatic, or rather abstract. Two-dimensional form is the foundation of pictorial organization or composition in painting, photography, and many other media. It is created in a number of ways. It can be defined by line, in all the ways described above. Line, either explicit or implied, provides the contour of forms. Value, the relative lightness or darkness of a color, can also define form. Strong contrasts in value within a composition may define the boundaries of forms. Gradations of value, or shading, can also create the illusion of contour and volume. In the same way, hue contrasts and gradations can also define forms. Form may also be defined by change in texture, even when hue and value remain essentially consistent. However, most typically, form is defined by a combination of these factors, as is the case in this print by Max Ernst. Form in relation to positive and negative space. Forms and shapes can be thought of as positive or negative. In a two-dimensional composition, the objects constitute the positive forms, while the background is the negative space. Some artists play with the reversal of positive and negative space to create complex illusions. The prints of M.C. Escher often feature interlocking images that play with our perception of what is foreground and what is background. Other artists take these illusions of positive and negative images to even greater lengths, hiding images within images. perception of form and shape are conditioned by our ingrained instinct to impute meaning and order to visual data. When we look at an image and initially form an impression, there is a tendency to latch onto that conclusion about its meaning, and then ignore other possible solutions. This may make it hard to see the other images. Training the eye to keep on looking beyond first impressions is a crucial step in developing true visual literacy.